Hi, I'm Rachel Edwards, the author of Darling. It's wonderful to be part of Good Housekeeping's Big Summer Book Day, so thank you for having me. And welcome here to my home, my conservatory, on this lovely summer day. As you can see, I have my nice summer drink. I'll leave you to decide whether or not it has gin in it. We authors like to keep you guessing, so it's up to you. But by the time I finish it, I should have talked you through some of my favourite reads of all time. The broader picture is that today I'm going to talk to you about a really hot topic, which is diversity in books, diversifying our bookshelves, reading people that we would not necessarily normally read. Now, these are not just fashionable books as such. They contain some classics and contemporary works, some fiction and some non-fiction. They all happen to be by women of colour, which might not sound that diverse in itself, but actually, when you add it to your no doubt groaning bookshelves and mix up with the many white male authors and other authors that are there, I'm sure it is a diverse addition potentially to lots of people's reading. But this isn't just some fashionable, topical, Black Lives Matter type reading list. It's important to say that. This is actually some of the finest fiction and non-fiction I've ever come across. Oh, I should actually add my books in there, but it'd be weird if it wasn't, right? So, yeah, I'm not boasting. But this is some of my favourite works by any authors, and they happen to be women of colour, which is why I'm talking about them today. So why? Why bother? Why should we diversify our reading at all? From my point of view, it's a really fundamentally important thing to do for us as individuals and as a society. Because if you think about it, reading is one of the best ways we have into the experience of someone else. We all know this. When you're reading, from childhood, when you're reading a favourite book, you can get inside the skin of someone to a different age or a different gender or a different species even, as well as a different race. There's all kinds of experiences we can live just by reading a book, whether it's in the first person or third person, whatever. That's a privilege as a human being to have that experience. So when we live in a world which is sadly divided along many fault lines, and one of them being race, it's fantastic to have an opportunity to live others' experiences. And reading, as well as writing, for me as an author, is a huge act of empathy. We get to live and share other experiences. I'll touch upon this again when I talk about my own book, Darling, a bit later on, because that's one of the drivers for me to write in the first place. But before that, there are some fantastic other books I'd like to talk to you about. So, here we go. First of all, the fiction. Let's start with a real classic. This is by an American great, an African-American great author, Toni Morrison, and this is her book, Beloved, which no doubt you've all heard about. Now, the late, great Toni Morrison is a Pulitzer Prize-winning author. She is a real hero to lots of people, for millions, and Beloved was the first book of hers that I read when I was about 13 or 14. It's set in the mid-1800s and slavery is coming to an end. The lead character, Sethe, is haunted by the violence of the time. I mean, it's horrific things that happened then, as we all know. And her dead daughter, Beloved, has come back to haunt her, to punish her, but also to elicit love from her mother. So it's an intriguing, fascinating, mind-blowing mix of horror and beauty and trauma and love. It's a unique book and it's quite unforgettable. So do read at some point Beloved. It's a real classic, and yeah, you won't forget it. Let me move that there. Now, if you love Toni Morrison, and who doesn't, you will love it. You should also read a far more contemporary book. This is Remembered by Yvonne Battle Felton. It came out just last year, I believe, and it is another really moving book with magical elements, if you like, with a touch of magic realism. It's set in 1910 in Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is burning. And Spring, the main character's son, Edward, is said to have run a streetcar into a shop window, and we don't know whether he did this or not. Did he or didn't he? It's a talk of the town. Edward is now horribly damaged. He's in hospital in what they call the coloured section of the hospital, and he's lying dying, and Spring is desperate to get through to him. So she goes there, and with the help of her dead sister's ghost, and some newspaper cuttings, and also some reconstructed memories, she tries to get through to Edward and to bring him home, as it were. It's an incredibly moving read. I remember crying for this. In fact, I love this so much. I did quote on the back of this, and I'll quote myself, which might be a bit cheeky, but it is about someone else's book. It says, "Some books both break your heart and set you free. Remembered will change you." And that's what I said about this book. So do read this one. The next is one of my favourite books of all time. Very new, very special. Girl, Woman, Other. Now, of course, you'd have heard about this by the wonderful Bernardine Evaristo, the Booker Prize winner. She won it jointly with Margaret Atwood. It's a fantastic book. Yes, I love this book very much indeed. Now, one of the reasons I love it is because it contains such rich diversity in its own right. You know, it's about 12 black women or women involved with black women's lives. These different characters who are all hugely diverse amongst themselves. So they range in age from 19 to 93, I think thereabouts. And they're all searching for something, whether it's love or career or whatever they're searching for. It interweaves beautifully, and the literary style is entirely beguiling. It really draws you in. It's a fusion of fiction. It's very clever. And it keeps you guessing, and it has wit and humour and passion and love and joy. It's a triumph of a book, absolute masterpiece, and I can't recommend it highly enough. So do read this book, Girl, Woman, Other. Now, well, think about it. Bernardine very kindly recommended my book, Darling, as one of her top 3 lockdown reads. I was delighted to hear. So it feels right that maybe I should now talk about my book that she recommended as well. Darling, this is the hardback version of it, which I wrote in 2018. So Darling it can be called a psychological thriller, and some people say it's more literary, some people say it's a mystery, a book of issues, but it's about a black British nurse, a stepmother called Darling White, and her white English stepdaughter who's 16, Lola. And they meet at the time of the EU referendum, when Darling meets her future husband, Thomas. Now, it's 2 worlds come and collide together, and really I explored the family really as a microcosm of what was happening to the country at that time, where people were pulling in different directions, and that is Darling and Lola. They have 2 very opposing viewpoints, and they each take a chapter, alternating chapters, and you find out about what happens to them. Now, on the first page, you know that one of them is dead within 6 months, but you don't know who or why. And the book unfolds quite quickly to reveal what exactly happened. So the main point of my book is to show that racism is a corrupting force. Racism corrupts love. That's the main message. So love always has to win. And that's why I thought it was fine to include Darling as part of this diverse reading chat, because in itself it shows diverse viewpoints and, as I said, looks at empathy, taking the different viewpoints of 2 very opposing characters and feeling what it's like to be in their shoes. So those are my fiction choices. So now I'm going to move. I'm sipping my summer drink. Is it gin or not? I'm going to move on to some real classics of non-fiction. The first is incredibly dear to my heart. It's called I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. It's her autobiography. Now, this is an extraordinary book. I first read it when I was around 12 or 13, and it completely blew me away. I think it's the first book I'd ever read by a black woman. So reading it not only spoke to me at a personal level, but in terms of my own aspirations to be an author, I thought, wow, black women write. It hadn't even really occurred to me up to that point. So it's fundamental in my developing as a person and as an author. It discusses, it talks about Maya's life from when she was very young and living in the 1930s American South, in this obviously very segregated society, and she recounts with humour and grace some of the real hardships and, frankly, trauma and abuse that she went through and came through to triumph as this person, this huge titan of culture. And we know she succeeds because we have a book, we know she comes through it somehow, but the question is how, and how does she do this? For me, this book is a triumph of the human spirit, and I'd recommend it to anyone. It's a wonderful book. This next book has broken all records recently in terms of popularity. So it's rather battered, but I've read it a lot. It's called Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by the wonderful Rennie Edo-Lodge. This is an incredibly important book. It's a firework of a book. And what it does is ask how we can see, acknowledge and counter racism in all its forms, whether it's individually or in institutions. It is a fantastic book. It's erudite, it's bright, it's no nonsense, it shoots from the hip, it's straight talking. And I think that everyone should read it. I've read it, my family's read it, my friends have read it. And I think it answers a lot of questions and throws up some more questions that need to be answered. A powerful, powerful book. So do read that one. Another book that is incredibly dear to my heart and my mind, my head was delighted to hear about this, is Superior by the wonderful Angela Saini. This book is something that when I heard about it, I wish it had been written when I was a young child. I felt that there'd been a great need for something like this for a long time. And when I read it, I thought, of course, this is what's been missing in the cultural conversation. We needed this book. Why? Well, it's a book that debunks the myth that underpins all of racism, basically. You know, we talk about beauty being skin deep and racism being disliking someone else's skin. Underpinning that has been years and years of lies that at heart, black people essentially are genetically inferior to the superior white race. Now this lie has been perpetuated so long, it's infiltrated all of our culture and all of our learning and all the science, most famously done by the Nazis. But the brilliant Angela Saini tears this down page by page by page. It is such an important book, and she does it in a really easy to follow way as well. So it's not all difficult scientific arguments. It's very clear and very accessible. But I'm just grateful that this book exists. I can't recommend it highly enough, and it should be compulsory reading at all schools, I think. So do recommend this to your friends as well. Now, finally, in the non-fiction section of my recommendation list is Don't Touch My Hair by Emma Davary. So I also love this. This is another one I was really keen to read. I've heard lots about it. It takes a look at a subject that's incredibly close to my heart, the magic and mystery and controversy and history of black women's hair. Now, obviously, I've had black women's hair my whole life, but I read this and there were things there that I didn't know or hadn't thought about, and revelations and surprises. And it's really humorous as well as well-researched. So I think it's an entertaining, informative read, really important, and it also explains why it's called Don't Touch My Hair for very good reasons. So you have to read to find out. Those are all my recommendations, the hottest ones I have for now. There are obviously many more wonderful books I can't talk about today, but do explore for yourself and see what you find when you're trying to diversify your bookshelves. I would like to say that diverse reading is not just a moment. It may be topical, but I think it's a way of approaching reading for life. It is part of enjoying that jumbled up, intoxicating essence of the world of books, and a way that we can all recognise the different humanity and in the other. Within a few pages, we can become other people and realise that the other is not quite so different after all. So I say, let's all dive into diversity. Any of the books I've mentioned make a brilliant read. As I say, they're some of the best fiction out there, not just for diverse reading, but for all books. And you might possibly like to start with me in my writing. Please do go ahead and read Darling. That would be great. If you want to find out more about me or my books, please go to racheledwards.com and you'll find all my info and be able to sign up to my newsletter. You can also follow me on Twitter, where I'm Rachel D. Edwards, or on Instagram, where I'm Rachel Edwards Author, I believe. So it'd be great to see you on social. If you do read something you love, or you're also diversifying your reading with other books you want to let me know about, or indeed you have anything to tell me about Darling, your opinions and thoughts, do get in touch. You can email me for the website, which again is racheledwards.com. So I'm off now to have an ice lolly. Have a great rest of the summer. Thanks for having me. See you soon. Bye.